All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our Trailblazers webinar today. My name is Sheryl O'Connor. I'm CEO and co-founder of IncomeConductor, an award-winning retirement income planning technology that engages your clients in the planning process and delivers income certainty, not probabilities. Our Trailblazer series highlights the people in our industry who are forging new paths and developing new ways to achieve success while providing great outcomes for your clients. We welcome your questions, so please type them into the Q&A box at any time during the webinar, and we'll try to address all of them at the end. It's my pleasure today to welcome our Trailblazer, Dr. K. Jeremy Coe. Jeremy has served as an expert in consumer and behavioral finance for over 20 years in industry, regulatory, and academic settings. His educational credentials include a PhD in financial economics from MIT's Sloan School of Management and a BA in physics from Harvard University. His past professional experience includes leadership roles at the top robo-advisory investment firm Edelman Financial Engines and AI-based consumer lending firm Upstart. He also previously served as a senior economist at the SEC and as an assistant professor of finance at Penn State University. Jeremy was awarded the Journal of Financial Planning's 2025 Best Research Award for his research on how to use personalized lifespan estimates that can improve Social Security claiming strategies compared to non-tailored approaches. He is currently developing and deploying predictive models of lifespan and other outcomes for retirement planning as CEO of the B2C fintech firm ShoreUp Retirement Solutions. Welcome, Jeremy. It's a great pleasure to have you on as my Trailblazer guest.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to your audience today.
Yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled. Let's start out by you sharing with our listeners the why behind your journey. What inspired you after getting a BA in physics to go into financial services as a career, and more specifically to focus on the impacts of longevity on retirement income planning?
Yeah, so the transition from physics to finance is something that happened a long, long time ago. I barely remember why I made that decision. It basically had something to do with the fact that I realized at some point in my education that I probably wasn't going to be the next Albert Einstein, and I was looking for something a little bit more lucrative, rewarding,
Mhm.
from a personal and financial standpoint. So that was the time when quant started entering Wall Street and doing derivatives pricing. So I thought this might be a good field to go in, and
Mhm.
ended up getting my graduate degree, my PhD in the field, and getting diverted to academia for a while. And then I ended up in 2009 at the Securities and Exchange Commission in DC. Shortly thereafter, I met a special somebody. So there's a very clear and personal reason why I entered into financial services, personal finance, whatever you want to call it. I met her at the gym. So this was before the days of Tinder. And very quickly after that, we decided to settle down, get married, have kids. And then for the first time in my adult life, I found myself needing to make these big financial decisions that I deferred. And even though I was a financial economist, never even thought about. So these are things like retirement investment, uh, insurance decisions, like how much life insurance to have. And I started to build tools for myself to make these decisions because I realized that they were pretty complicated and a lot of them were interwoven. So I started developing applications and pulled in some of this work into my portfolio projects at the SEC and develop these tools, not just for myself, but also for my friends and family. And very quickly realized that my true interests and passions were no longer in academic research and in regulatory economics, but rather in financial services and in helping people, households, families make good, sound financial decisions and promote their financial well-being. And I think there's a second part to your question about why I decided to focus on longevity. So
Mhm.
with that, I was in the financial services industry, the fintech industry for a bit, and got exposed to some of the retirement income planning models that they had out there and saw some significant deficiencies in those models. Um, they weren't as sort of state of the art, let's say, as the IncomeConductor software that's out there. They had some gaps in there, and I decided in early 2023 to become a solopreneur and thought to myself, well, what is one issue, one gap that I could tackle that is doable for me and that represents a significant gap in the current practice. And that had to do with personalized lifespan estimation and other kinds of predictive models that feed into retirement planning. So that's how I decided to develop that tech.
Wow. So this is a consistent theme across all of my Trailblazer guests. Usually their passion comes from some personal experience where they see a gap and they want to innovate a solution to, that particular problem. So let's go back to the research. I've noticed over the past couple of years, we've seen an increased focus on this area of longevity projections and estimating and its impacts on planning. In your opinion, what is driving that increased focus, and what can the research that's being done or done to date really teach us about longevity projections and estimations?
Yeah, so I can only guess that what's driving the focus on retirement planning technology and lifespan estimation in particular is a couple of things. Number one, of course, we've got this huge demographic shift with boomers retiring, and
Hmm.
so there's a lot of entrepreneurial interest and venture capital interest in developing technologies and solutions for older Americans, seniors, and retirees. Like the Age Tech Collaborative, for example, is an incubator at AARP, which generates a ton of interest and a ton of startups trying to join that particular incubator. But then, of course, we've also got this AI tech thing that's happening in the country and worldwide as well, where we're trying to look for solutions where machine learning, artificial intelligence, these things that can feed into predictive models could
Hmm.
help generate outcomes. And I think retirement income planning is a natural place where that can fit in. So lifespan estimation being one of those possible inputs. And then you've got other things like prediction of future healthcare costs, predictions of future health span, long-term care funding needs. Of course, these are all things that are covered in the income conductor software. And these are places where technology and retirement planning, these two big growing areas can merge.
Hmm.
Um, Now, what the research can teach us is a couple things. Number one is that there is a very wide variation across individuals in terms of expected lifespan, depending on their attributes. So it would be a mistaken notion to think that the variation between one person and another is, something small, like let's say on the order of 2, 3 years, let's say
Hmm.
at the age of 65 when they retire. It's actually more like 10 to 20 years, depending on their health behaviors, their chronic conditions, stuff like education, even where they're located. So all these things can make a huge impact on individual variation in expected lifespan. And the point of the research that we did at the FPA conference was to quantify the dollar value of personalized lifespan estimation in retirement income planning. And we did that within the particular setting of Social Security because it was amenable to quantification and found that even in sort of the simplest setting with an unmarried individual, that you can derive a $10,000 benefit on average per person, per client,
Hmm.
um, if you incorporate personalized lifespan estimation. And which planner in the world out there wouldn't want an extra $10,000 in their client's pocket over their retirement?
Exactly. And we're seeing even greater numbers between, like an early claiming strategy and using personalized longevity projections to get the maximum benefits over time. And I think, one of the things that the industry has been slow to move to is this idea, this kind of rule of thumb, where for decades, advisors thought they were addressing longevity risk by just running plans out, assuming both clients are going to live to 95, even 100. Um, those who do use longevity projections often use national averages. So can you go more deeply into how personalized longevity projections and retirement income planning will impact, the income that the client can receive over their, retirement period?
Yeah, so I think the most obvious place to start is with Social Security claiming.
Hmm.
That's the focal point of my research. But then I want to discuss how this feeds into retirement income optimization more broadly. But just starting with Social Security, I think it's generally known among planners and even among individuals that if you're expected to live a short period of time, that you ought to claim Social Security early because you don't want to miss out on those payments in your 60s. But conversely, if you're expected to live a very long time, let's say you're in robust health, you've
Hmm.
got longevity in your family history, you could reasonably be expected to live until into your 90s, perhaps till 100. Then you're going to want to claim Social Security late because the later you claim, let's say you claim at age 70, the higher your monthly payment. And
Hmm.
if you're expecting a lot of monthly payments over the course of a long lifespan, that higher monthly payment is going to make more of a difference. So that's one place where it very clearly can make a big difference. If I'm, let's say, terminally ill and, expecting to pass away in my 60s, why would I want to defer Social Security claiming versus someone who's going to live a very long time would want to postpone their Social Security claiming to get as much from the system and in terms of total payments as possible. But these lifespan estimates help with a lot of other decision making in retirement income planning as well. I mean, one obvious place is with savings thresholds. So one of the one of the downsides to living a long time. There's a lot of good things about living a long time, especially if you've got healthy years. But one of the downsides financially is the fact that you're going to need more money. You've got
Right.
higher savings thresholds, and you've got potentially lower withdrawal rates. You may want to work longer as well to be able to finance your retirement if you're going to live a long time. And it's important to take these things into consideration when you're thinking about how much money you need in retirement, what your systematic withdrawal rates ought to be. I think the 4% rule, sure, maybe like that could work for somebody, but there's a lot of people that it
Yeah.
doesn't work very well for. For example, people that are expected to live a very long time, that they ought to think a little bit more carefully about what their withdrawal strategy should be, incorporating their lifespan projection. And then there's other places where it life expected lifespan and differences in expected lifespan between different spouses can make a big impact that are kind of surprising, I
Hmm.
think, to a lot of planners and to a lot of people, including myself. Um, and that is with respect to tax optimization. So, for example, if one spouse, typically the male, is gonna pass away before the other, and the other has long expected lifespan, then you've got a situation where the taxes can significantly shift upon passing. So in other words,
Hmm.
you've gone from a couple that is filing jointly that's got a lower marginal tax, that's got a higher tax bracket, to an individual who's filing by themselves with a lower tax bracket and all of a sudden hit by these additional taxes from RMDs, et cetera. And thinking about the impact of lifespan on that kind of decision a priori when you're in the planning stage, thinking about things like Roth conversions, et cetera, makes a lot of
Hmm.
sense. And again, IncomeConductor is one of these softwares that covers that helps people optimize around that.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, beyond the Social Security strategy, there are a lot of ways that you can develop a plan that will address those issues, those tax issues. So, another rule of thumb in the industry, unfortunately, is the liquidation order of assets.
Hmm.
So, a lot of advisors, and we call it kind of the CPA's dream, is to liquidate all of the non-qualified assets first before moving to the tax-free and qualified, which, to your point, sets that surviving spouse up for, large RMDs, which
Hmm.
could push her into higher tax brackets, incur IRMA surcharges, things like that. Um, and that survivorship period, I think research has shown us on average is 12 and a half to 13 years.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's a lot of time for all of those impacts. It's like a tsunami when the husband dies and the wife is faced with all of these challenges. Um, so let's go back to the Social Security claiming. It's kind of counterintuitive, but if you do have a husband who has a chronic condition, or multiple chronic conditions, and the
Mhm.
wife is very healthy,
Mhm.
what is the optimal Social Security claiming strategy in your predictive models? What's the
Oh,
approach there?
goodness. So I'm actually working on a research piece that addresses similar questions when we're looking at variations in lifespan within a couple. But I'm going to have to take a second to think about it. So you've got a short-lived husband and a long-lived wife. Typically, the husband, okay, so a lot of it's going to depend on whether or not the wife's depending on a spousal benefit or not.
Hmm.
So if she is depending on a, so typically the strategy, if she's not depending on a spousal benefit, is going to be her claiming early. Okay, so I'm coming up with a very sort of traditional stereotypical couple here, and forgive me, forgive me for having the stereotype, but I have to sort of work within one example to be able to answer the question.
Hmm.
People can feel free to reach out to me if they want sort of advice on other kinds of more complicated, and of course they can also use the IncomeConductor software. Um, but in the particular case where the man has higher earnings than the woman, and the woman is relying on a survivor benefit, but not really relying on a spousal benefit because she's got her own work record, and
Hmm.
her own benefit is comparable, maybe a little bit less, but comparable to his, then in that situation, typically the optimum is going to be um, her claiming at 62 and then him claiming at 70. The reason being that he's going to pass along his benefit in terms of a survivor benefit to her. Hers is going to be short-lived because he unfortunately will pass away somewhat early, and then she just wants to get her benefit early, get that short-lived benefit, and then move on to the long-lived benefit. Things get a bit more complicated if she's really relying on a spousal benefit, and then you have a lot more coordination between the two in the couple because she does not become eligible for her spousal benefit until he claims his benefit. So what happens then typically is that he's going to wait until she turns 67. He's going to claim his benefit that enables her to get her spousal benefit, and then she will get her survivor benefit after that. It gets really complicated, and this is yet another reason why I think the vast majority of people are going to benefit, not only on the consumer side, but on the planner side, going to benefit from having some kind of software to help people
Hmm.
optimize around all these individualized circumstances. So these aspects of personalization are incredibly important. And one other thing that you brought up about these rules of thumb, like let's take from our qualified account, or let's take from our IRA or 401k first and then do this. These rules of thumb that can be very flawed is things should be personalized not over lifespan, but also things like your bequest motive. How much do you want to leave
Hmm.
behind to your heirs? Then your tax optimization is going to be quite different because the thing that you're trying to do then is put some weight on how much tax your heirs are going to have to pay. So, I mean, I think a general takeaway from this conversation that I'm hoping people will embrace is the movement toward all sorts of types of personalization and planning, whether it's in lifespan
Yeah.
estimation, in preferences and goals, in lots of different areas, but just a movement toward personalization, whether you're using analytics to do so or you're using your subjective judgment to take the client's preferences and their goals and their values into account. Just a deeper kind of personalization for the planning profession, I think, would be a good direction to move in.
Yeah, and we have the data, right? And we have the technology to do it. We just need to kind of change that entrenched mindset around
Mhm.
addressing longevity risk in such a way that we miss these key components. Can you talk about chronic conditions? What are the major drivers for, lifespan versus not? I think people get confused over, those conditions and making a judgment call on them.
Yeah, so chronic conditions certainly have a big impact on lifespan, and smoking does as well. So these are some of the most important health attributes. Absent a knowledge of chronic conditions, believe it or not, if you ask someone whether or not they feel like they're healthy, that can be a very big predictor as to future lifespans. In fact, it's one of the biggest absent this other information. Like that and smoking can have a really big impact. Like if someone says they're in poor health, generally that has an impact of about 8 to 10 years on their expected future lifespan. Let's say if they're
Mm,
in their 60s. Um, and then there's some demographic inputs that matter. There's things like gender. Gender has about a 2 to 3 year impact on expected lifespan,
mhm,
and things like college education. If you control for everything else, so of course, if you're educated, you're probably gonna exhibit better health behaviors because you're more informed about things like diet and exercise, and you may have better access to um, healthcare, for example. So,
mhm.
but that actually doesn't even make that doesn't make that big of a difference. It makes a difference of about a year in expected lifespan versus these other health related factors, which make a much bigger impact.
Yeah,
Um,
it's really interesting. I mean, we see a real, like a 10-year difference in the personalized actuarial lifespan projections if somebody has like diabetes type 2,
yeah.
you know. But I think one of the things is that what I love about using this data is it's the first step in a conversation.
Hmm.
It's opening up the doors to a deeper conversation with the client. So you could do this analysis, the longevity, the Social Security claiming, come up with the best claiming strategy, present that data to a client, and then the client may come back and say, I just don't want to take income that long from my investments before I claim Social Security. Maybe they have a personal fear of Social Security going bankrupt over the next few years. So, it leads into deeper behavioral and, even political views of the
Yeah.
client that may change that claiming strategy for other reasons. But at least they have a starting point where they have really good data.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, I want to get to a very important question that was part of our learning objectives for this conversation, and that's the whole discussion around longevity. The reason we pulled in, and this is 3, 4 years ago, we started pulling in personalized actuarial longevity projections into our planning software was because advisors were faced with a very uncomfortable conversation, sitting down with a client saying, basically, when do you think you're going to die, client?
Uh-huh.
Who wants to talk about those things when clients are excited about retiring and planning for retirement? So, how do you think advisors can have more productive conversations around this topic?
Yeah. So first of all, it's a fantastic question. It's a super important question for client planner relationships. So believe it or not, my background prior to getting into this kind of actuarial science technology and these predictive machine learning models, it was in behavioral economics. So this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I want to start by citing someone in your network, Cheryl. Her name is Megan Lertz. So
Hmm.
she is a behavioral psychologist who specializes in financial planning and has done work for firms like Nomi and advised Nomi. And I had a very nice conversation with her about this, and she said that, she adopts approach that's taken from therapy, and I think this is something that's pretty common among the planner community. But I just want to kind of codify this a little bit, and basically what she espouses is an approach where there's rapport building and empathy and discussion of vision, and all these kind of soft conversations to establish and build the relationship initially, and maybe not even in the first intake meeting getting into any of the numerical inputs. And once you establish that, you can get into the numerical inputs. And if you want to get into a conversation about lifespan, you can seek the permission of the client to have that conversation. And if they provide that consent to have that conversation, then explore topics in that area. um, and there's other ways around these kinds of issues as well. This kind of ostrich effect where a client or even a planner may want to bury their heads in the sand when it comes to
Hmm.
thinking about issues related to lifespan, and some things that evoke shame, like whether or not you smoke, chronic conditions. It's, whether or not you can went to college, perhaps. Um, One is that you can have the client, hopefully the technology facilitates the client to be able to input those things privately and
Mm,
securely, give security assurances, and also allows them optionality so they don't have to enter in certain inputs. So, my company's technology allows people to emit certain inputs, as they so desire. Um, and and then on top of that, there's sort of classical behavioral economics in the sense that there's ways to frame lifespan that make a shorter lifespan maybe not so scary. Because the one upshot of shorter lifespan that I mentioned earlier with respect to finances is that you're less exposed to longevity risk. So
mhm.
again, if you're expected to live a very long time, that could be a very nice thing, provided that you have good health span as well. But the downside of that is that you're going to need more money in retirement. You could need to work earlier. You could need to withdraw less, be much more conservative with your finances than someone who's got a shorter projected lifespan. I'm not saying don't be conservative with their particular, lifespan estimate in their particular situation. It's okay to provide a cushion, but you can also be personalized about it. And with that kind of client, it might be okay for them to retire earlier. It might be okay for them to retire with a little bit less and to withdraw more and to enjoy from their savings more earlier on in their go-go years of retirement.
Yeah. And we found that people who do have,
Mhm.
very good health and very long periods in retirement could pay even double the healthcare costs that people who have chronic conditions would
Right.
pay just because
Right.
their longevity is less, right?
Hmm.
Which is also counterintuitive. So we have some questions here. Lee asks, how should you plan for a couple's portfolio to last for? I'm not sure how you would answer that, but
No, I mean, I think that's a great question, and it's sort of the entry question for this particular, topic that we're talking about.
yeah.
And so there's a lot of lifespan calculators out there, including the ones that are embedded in IncomeConductor, and embedded in the software that I share to the consumer public. But there's a lot of other ones that I can make people aware of. There's one from the University of Connecticut. There's one from Northwestern Mutual, which has a really, really huge laundry list of inputs. But I think it's important to sort of do some kind of projection of lifespan for both the individuals and the couple, and maybe
Mhm,
set the retirement plan length based on that. And if you want to be conservative, perhaps add a few years of cushion. And I think David Blanchett has a particular approach that he endorses where he takes the personalized estimate and then tacks on something like 5 to 7 years at the end of that.
mhm,
And there's various calculators, like the Society of Actuaries has a lifespan calculator. And again, like my company, Short Retirement Solutions, does, where you can get the 90th percentile lifespan if you want to be conservative. So in other words, not just the median lifespan, so how long they're expected to live, but the optimistic lifespan on a personalized basis for that particular individual.
mhm.
Because my optimistic lifespan may be quite a bit different than your optimistic lifespan, depending on, our particular individual circumstances.
Yeah, and most actuarial longevity estimates are the top of the bell curve, right? So
Hmm.
50% of the population will live longer and 50%
Hmm.
will die sooner. So
Hmm.
I think it's a good starting point rather than
Hmm.
just a random everybody's going to live to 95.
Hmm.
Um, Doug said, what tools can be used to determine a client's personalized longevity projection?
Yeah, so I alluded to those tools and I'll repeat them again. So one of them, and unfortunately, I can't share links here, but people can feel free to reach out to me, either via LinkedIn or my company email address, jeremy@shoreupretire.com. But there's some some good lifespan calculators that are out there. Society of Actuaries is one if you want some minimal inputs, like smoking and self-rated health. And then if you want to get much, much more expansive about the client intake and covering things like, drinking, smoking, drug use. It's kind of invasive,
Hmm.
honestly. Driving history, whether or not they wear a seatbelt, uh, loneliness, social relationships, just a whole gamut. That calculator is hosted by Northwestern Mutual. Um, and both of these I think are based on really good data sets, good calculators. The With the Northwestern Mutual, I think they probably just provide an expected lifespan, and if you want to be conservative, you may want to add a cushion to that lifespan. And again, Short Retirement Solutions has one, and all this stuff is embedded in the Income Conductor financial planning software as well.
Yeah, and we find that this data, is interrelational, right?
Hmm.
So just one example is the Social Security claiming strategy is based heavily on the individual spouse's personalized longevity projections.
Right.
Rosemary has a really interesting questions here. How will this affect annuity payout rates going forward?
Yeah. So this is one of those things that the insurance industry doesn't want you to do. So, in other words, it doesn't want you to funnel your longer lived clients toward annuities because that's what's going to make sense. If you have a shorter lived client, typically they're not you're not going to want them to annuitize because they're not going to get as much back from an annuity if they're going to be living a short time. Whereas if they're going to live a long time,
Hmm.
um, you you're gonna want to funnel them, toward an annuity possibly because they could get a lot of lifetime income from that annuity at a lower upfront investment. So yeah, it's something that the insurance industry doesn't necessarily want you to do, but it's something that your clients could definitely benefit from. Now, how it's going to affect insurance rates in the future, I really don't know. If everyone moves toward a personalized approach toward annuitization, it's definitely going to affect rates in some way, probably making them more expensive or probably making them a little bit more like life insurance in the sense that there might be a health exam or something like that associated with annuities.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I think on that insurance supply side, I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen, and I'm not an expert in authority, but I do know on the demand side, on the planner side, on the customer side, that having some kind of personal lifespan estimation is really going to help with annuity selection, annuity choice.
Yeah, well, I will say that the institutional provider of the data that we integrate into Income Conductor for longevity projections and healthcare, personalized healthcare expenses, they've been giving that data for years to large insurance companies and banks.
Hmm.
So, I'm really glad to see that, the wealth side of the business, the retail side of financial services is coming around to seeing how important this information is. So
Absolutely.
we are past the half hour. We could probably talk for hours more with you, Jeremy. You're so interesting.
Thank you.
But wrapping up, can you share with our listeners more information about the technology you've built for consumers? How they could access that for their own clients.
Yeah, so I mean, the technology that we built is pretty straightforward, and it's available on our company website, shortretirement.com, and it's a Social Security optimizer that individuals can use to they input their demographic and health attributes. It imputes their expected lifespan, and then it optimizes their Social Security based on that. There's a free online app for unmarried individuals. There's one with a subscription fee that's for married couples that we're currently enhancing. So one of the big pushes that we're trying to do at Short Retirement Solutions is to get the word out, not just to the planning community, but also to direct to consumers to say, look, this is something that you ought to be thinking about it, and this is a way that you ought to be thinking about it, taking into account these important factors. Rather than assuming that you're just going to live till 100. Think about your Social Security and claiming in a personalized way.
Yeah, well, thank you so much because there is a significant amount of our population who will probably never engage a financial advisor. And, because of their savings level,
Hmm.
or access. And, having these tools available is so important to them. So thank you for that service. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, of course. I just hope that people use it and find it useful and that it helps.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. It's been wonderful. And thank you all for joining us for this conversation and be on the lookout for the next Trailblazer conversation. Take care, everybody.